Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I guess before we jump into the agenda, would love to do a quick round of introductions. Welcome to the first meeting of the Youth Board and Youth Committee of 2019. We have a packed agenda. There is so much exciting stuff happening. So I guess I will start. My name is Alexa Aviles. I'm with the Sherman Foundation, and I am your very honored and humbled chair.
Hi, I'm Liz Cribs with the Newburgh Berman Foundation. I have to apologize in advance. We have a foundation board meeting at 10:30, so I'm going to run uptown around 9:30 just to open that one up, but welcome everyone.
Good morning, Tom Pendleton, New York City Department of Education. Happy to be here.
Hi everybody, I'm Patty Macker. I'm the Executive Director of Futures and Options. And I think this is my last meeting because we just got funded. Okay? So I'm here. But I'm also going to a meeting today.
Of the orientation?
At 2.
Yes.
I'm at the 2, okay? So anyway.
Congratulations.
I hope so.
Good morning, I'm Jeanette Rodriguez, I'm with Nike. I'm going to apologize in advance because I am under the weather and I'm going to head out a few minutes early so I can get to the doctor as I'm sick and have made my kiddo sick as well.
I'm Sarah Marks from DYCD External Relations. I'm the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs.
I'm Jackie Chang, and I am the Director of Advancement at Recess Activities.
Good morning, everyone. Anthony Ng, Deputy Chief of Staff at DYCD.
Good morning. I'm Jordana Lee from Lincoln Center, and I'm on the Executive Committee.
Hi, good morning. Apologies for my tardiness. I'm Milagros Ramirez. I'm in the Planning Unit at DYCD.
Okay, I'm Bill Chong, Commissioner. I'm just looking at what's in the report, so I don't repeat what's in the written report. Sorry? Yeah. So, some good news, some not so good news. So let me start with the good news. I know at the end we talked about the summer youth employment program. So after 3 years of planning, truly, I mean, the funding for the summer youth employment program was baseline and made permanent in June of 2016. It's taken us almost 3 years to get to the point where we developed a work group with the City Council, developed recommendations, which informed the concept paper, and the concept paper, focus groups, the RFP, the review process. So almost 3 years, 2 years, 9 months. We finally announced awards. We call it SYP 3.0 because it's the first significant change to SYP since 2005. We've brought in many new providers, like Futures and Options being one of them, first time. But an interesting array of groups. 1199 is now a summer youth employment contractor. They I think applied for the year-round program that aligns what happens during the school year with the summer work experience. So we're really excited. We've doubled the number of programs from 101 to 195 programs. For the first time, we have 45 programs in the schools, and mostly career technical education schools, some community schools as well. So it's a very different model than certainly the summer youth employment program I was involved in the 70s, and even very different from the one in the early 2000s. So we're very excited about that. So that's part of the good news. Last year we did 75,000 young people, 70,000 baseline, which we expect to continue this year. Another 5,000 were done last year with additional money for the summer. And I testified before the City Council yesterday, and so the question came up was, how many more jobs could you do? And I said, as many as you want to add. Because the challenge for many years is that we were limited by the 101 programs that were designed in 2012, which is the last time we did a request for proposal, which were designed to serve 30,000 young people. So we had stretched the infrastructure beyond the breaking point. So now with 195 programs, if the council decides to add 10,000 new jobs or 15 new jobs, we're in a better place to absorb it. As opposed to having 101 programs, we'll have 195 who we can go to say, how many more jobs can you handle? The other bit of good news is that later this spring, sometime in April actually, we're going to be launching our universal application. The internal working name is Service Hub, which is not the marketing term. We're going to take our app, Discover DYCD, and make it a universal application. So instead of just being able to search for a DYCD program in a neighborhood, you can apply for multiple programs in one place. And so it's going to be a 21-month rollout. We're launching it in April or May, right? And then we're going to be adding programs every few months. The last program to be entered into this new universal application will be Summer Youth Employment Program, which will be January of 2021. It'll allow for basically service integration. And so one of the things I'm pushing for is we're going to be doing a presentation, and we can have one at the youth board as well, maybe in the next meeting as well, because it will be up and running by then. We're having a 30th anniversary of the Interagency Coordinating Council on Youth, which was created in 1989 to encourage coordination among youth serving agencies. So we're having a breakfast April 10th, right, at 2 Lafayette. And so I'm trying to get some of the frontline the agencies that would benefit from using this, HRA, Homeless Services, ACS, probation, that this is a tool for their clients. So when a person comes to them for food stamps, they can also help them apply for after school, SYP, and the system will allow for a third party to apply for someone else. So this is part of my bucket list, which is to sort of transform DYC into a settlement house, and we're going to be able to do it among the programs we fund. So that's the two bits of good news that weren't really in the report. The not so good news is, as you probably have heard, the city is going through a PEG exercise. PEG meaning Program to Eliminate the Gap. So our target is 11.5 million. 500,000 this fiscal year, 11, and the rest. And so the difference between a PEG and an efficiency savings is a PEG is a permanent cut. So having been through this, and many of the staff at DYC have been through this, my perspective on this is that I think we're in a better place. One is I think the economic slowdown we're heading into is not as bad as the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. The second, I think, big difference between the Bloomberg years and the de Blasio years is that many of the areas we grew in were campaign promises. Whereas Bloomberg, had his own priorities, youth services was not one of his priorities. And the third big change, I think.
Garcia, we started, but we got you on the line.
And the third big change is that I think Speaker Johnson is taking a much more aggressive position on cuts to social services. The Quinn-Bloomberg dynamic was Speaker Quinn kind of let Mayor Bloomberg do whatever he wanted and then decided to restore funding in one-year allocations. In fact, at one point under Bloomberg, almost 40% of our budget depended on one-year restorations in June. So half our after-school programs, half our homeless youth programs, half our summer jobs program, all depended on the council and Speaker Quinn to restore the money. Speaker Johnson, in his very first speech last year, said that there are going to be cuts. He wants social services to be harmless. He reiterated that about 2 weeks ago when the preliminary budget came out and there was talk about budget cuts. And ironically, yesterday after I did my budget hearing, I was walking through the lobby of City Hall and bumped into the speaker, and I thanked him for standing up for social services, because that's his red line in the sand as far as and he does have leverage here. He can decide not to vote on the budget unless certain changes are made. So I'm hopeful. The deadline for us to submit is tomorrow, so I have nothing to share. For the first time, the city published the targets last week before the budget director testified. We got our target maybe 3 hours before it went public. So we were not consulted on the 11.5. And the one good thing I think I've tried to educate the council about, every time I've testified the last 5 years, I've made the point, something we didn't do during the Bloomberg years, 94% of our budget goes to services. That's an incredible number. 6% is what's called indirect, meaning rent for this space, and headcount, staff. So there's not a lot of layers of bureaucracy here. And so I was pleased to see the city council, before each budget hearing, the staff prepares a committee report. And they said prominently, 94% of DYCD's budget goes out the door into services. So we're in this kind of funny position. We're not a direct service agency like the NYPD or the school system or sanitation, but 94% of our budget goes to services. That's an important point for everyone to understand. So, and the council got it. The fact that the council staff put it in there means the 5 years I've been harping on this point during good times. And I also made the point that, we found savings. 60% of our staff is in rent-free space at 2 Lafayette. And over the weekend, we finally gave up the space at 161 William, which has been space we have used since 1996. So now the remaining 40% of the staff are on this floor or upstairs. So we've looked for savings throughout the 5 years, even in the good times. So I'm hoping the council comes to our rescue. And once we have a final head target, we'll share it with you. But it's not going to be easy, because if 94% of our budget goes out the door, there's not many places I can cut. Can't lay off people, can't stop paying rent on this place, just finite choices of options we have. So that's the not so good news. Any questions?
So I see reference here, and as Chris was involved in hiring in our office. I wonder how your team is affected by the partial hiring freeze. Are you having difficulty filling people's positions when they leave? Is that also an issue that you're facing?
So, so far the hiring freeze has slowed us down, but not stopped us. But then we're waiting to hear how things will change. Whether it's going to be, because it's partial hiring freeze, but then we can backfill as other vacancies become available. Whether now it's a hard freeze, we don't know. The mayor's talked about holding harmless positions that are frontline. Well, we don't do frontline. Our frontline is the person who processes the contract or approves the budget, because our constituents are nonprofits. So they don't have the staff to process the budget or get the contract registered, is going to be impacted. So we don't know yet what it will mean. The one good thing is in the preliminary budget, OMB did give us money to hire additional staff for the Summer Youth Employment Program, because that came up in the budget hearing yesterday, and the council wasn't clear that we had to explain. We're doubling the number of programs, 101 to 195, which means more site visits, which means we've gone from 4 different options to 9 different options. So we're much more specialized. So we have to have people who can specialize, because how we monitor a school-based program may be different than how we monitor a program for younger youth, which is a stipend model, which is more career exploration. So that money was in the budget for SYP staff, and I don't think it's going to be touched. But going forward, it's unclear what impact it will have.
Any other questions for the commissioner? Great, thank you so much. Before we move forward, I'd love to check in with the folks on the phone. Who's on the phone right now? If you can introduce yourselves. Okay. So hi, Sandy.
Hi.
If you would introduce yourself.
Like a talk show host.
Sandy Trujillo, I'm with the Mayor's Office of Children's Cabinet.
Naira Flake Brown.
So next on the agenda, we're gonna have an update on the youth board, youth committee.
So good morning. So we've had a couple of changes, and we have a couple of people who have actually resigned, and now more. So Victoria San Martino from the youth board and Maureen O'Connor from the youth council, both of them have resigned. And so we also had a youth board member, Brianna Thomas. Is it Thomas? Thompson. Sorry. So Brianna, I don't think I have met her. She has actually not been at one of these meetings in years. We reached out to her recently and sent her an email saying, we haven't had you here. We'd love to know if you're still interested. Please respond by, I think it was February 15th. We never heard back from her. So, and in terms of our bylaws, if somebody misses, I think, half the meetings and over a 12-month period and fails 2 consecutive regular scheduled meetings, we have the right to vote them off the youth board. We've reached out repeatedly over the years, and I think, Anthony, you said, like, even during your time here, you haven't had her participate at all. So that, and that's multiple years. It's not just 6 months period. So we're looking to actually be able to vote her off, because what we're wanting to do is start to fill all these vacancies and actually have active members. And so it looks like we have about 4 vacancies that we're going to fill in the next few months. So we'd love to make sure that these spots that are not being used are freed up, and that we can actually start thinking about people to nominate. One of the things that we're really interested in is trying to think about people in the tech sector, and other ways that we can, support the youth. We also are continuing the conversation of what younger people are involved, how that that maybe advisory role can be. So that's something that we're still very much engaged in. But would really encourage you all for the next few days to think about people who you would like to nominate. In that process, I think, is it that you would like for them to send you names, or is it that you want us to do some reconnaissance first?
Yeah, so if there are people that you think who would be good on the board, feel free to talk to them yourselves directly about your experience, let them know what the board does, and if they're interested, I'm always happy as part of the process to talk to them, give them more details, and then talk them through the actual approval process. So, if you have some names, think about it, let me know if you reach out to them first. I think it makes sense for any of you who have these relationships to do that initial outreach, right? And if there's interest, I can speak with them further.
Just to clarify, so they should not be senior leaders in an organization that's funded by DYCD.
That's correct. Our bylaws stipulate that if you're a key personnel, an officer, or head of an entity that does business with DYCD, you cannot serve on the board, and that is unfortunately why Patty was going to have to step down after this meeting, because her organization just got 2 awards for Summer Youth Employment Program, and Patty and I had a few conversations about this when we were discussing her joining the board. So, but that's correct, Tom. Yes. I could send those bylaws around again, and so everyone can see that language. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, the key thing in the bylaws is if you're a key personnel, staff person of the agency, if you're not a decision maker in the agency, you could serve. But point well taken, and we've actually have had some challenges filling the board, because we have gotten names over the years and found out that they were doing their organization or their affiliation were doing business with us, and unfortunately we couldn't consider some folks. I think that's something the board can look at. I mean, something the board we can look at that, so.
I don't know if we have enough people. We have a quorum, so I would like to put the vote out to remove Brianna from this board. So if you would like to motion that, great. And second. Okay, if we could take a vote. All in favor of removing her from the board? Great. Anyone not in favor? Okay, great. So that's, I think, a unanimous vote there. Great, thank you guys. So yeah, please, let's think about who we might want to get involved. And if you have any, I mean, I'm also happy to be an advocate of any sort, so feel free. Great. I don't think that's it. We're good. All right.
Great, thank you, Jordana. So, yeah, let's keep the momentum. As you're gonna see, one of the things that is really important is active board engagement. So as you're thinking of your Rolodex of amazing people, we want folks with energy who want to jump in and do some of the things that we're gonna hear about. So next we're gonna move on to the report on the visit of Compass program. So as you know, DYCD has a strong emphasis on youth employment, both through its SYP, Ladders for Leaders, its other employment programs. We know that providing job opportunities for young people gives them a chance to explore their careers and industries, build skills and networks, and so it's a really critical part of the programming. So in order to support part of the career exploration focus, back in September we had asked members if they were interested in hosting young people at their places of employment. And several of you volunteered, and we're really happy to say that Ms. Nyla Flake Brown was the first person on the board to be able to host a group of young people during this past winter break this February. So I'd love Nyla to be able to share her experience with young people at her site.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. So on February 20th, the Wednesday of the school winter break, we hosted at Brookfield, which is a real estate, it's a private equity firm, but the focus of the day, because my focus is real estate, was really on real estate, and it was really a lot easier and fulfilling than I thought it would be. To begin with, I think that a lot of us had a lot of questions very early on, you know, how much work, how many students. Once I really got the information and we decided we were going to focus on 20 to 30 students, we picked a day. It really became very easy from that point on. We do have a philanthropy organization, but I even use this as a opportunity for my immediate group to bond, which actually made it a lot easier because I had a lot less red tape, and then I invited a philanthropy group to join us, and now they're excited about things that they can do in the future for DYCD. So the day basically consisted of, well, first of all, I want to commend the students and the staff members who came because it was snowing that day. So I was very nervous about the attendance, but they still came out, and the providers, the leaders from the various providers were in attendance. Everyone came, they were excited. We had a quick lunch, and again, even the financial obligation, that was one thing that I think a lot of people asked about their high school students. We had pizza, you know, not really a big deal. I told my boss, like, I pay for it. She's like, no, like, the group will put in for it. So the members of my group, we bought the kids pizza. And then our day consisted of really just an overview of what our company does. We talked a little bit about both the finance industry, private equity, as well as real estate. And then we also just did a general topic career panel, just so that we picked a couple of younger people in the organization who could just talk about, you know, how they got to where they are. They all came from different backgrounds, so that, you know, for the kids who may not necessarily have been interested in real estate and finance, they were able to just hear and be encouraged more broadly about career aspirations and, you know, working hard, thinking about college, thinking about what to major in. We also had recently Brookfield acquired a company called Forest City, so now we are the largest owner of real estate in New York City. So I thought it'd be cool to have some of our younger people who work in those groups to come and talk to the students. Coincidentally, we had a huge cohort of students from the Bronx, and one of the projects that we talked about that day was a new development we have happening in the Bronx. So I thought it really, allowed the students to relate, and really good questions came out of it. And then our company owns the Atlantis and Bahamas, so we just thought that would be fun to talk about, and I'll close up with some general career advice. So it was, once I just said, okay, this is the date, I'm gonna do it, it was really easy. If anyone ever had any questions on like ways to maybe talk to people internally to get it done, like I said, I realized for me the best thing to do was go through my group instead of the philanthropy group, and then later on we found out that I forgot which program she said. Not ladder school leaders.
I forgot the name
Is
of
it
the program.
steps
It's a
or
new program.
it's a new program. It's a new DYCD program that apparently we're already in discussions about participating in. I forget which one it is, but the point is they were now even more excited about continuing. I think we did a pilot last year, and they were. I'll email you when I remember what it is. I did the same thing. I keep forgetting the name of the program.
It's a mentorship program that we're doing.
I think it might be intern and earning and fundamental.
Alright, well anyway, yes. And so anyway, everyone in my company who participated, they were thrilled. It was so fulfilling. The kids were engaged. And again, if you have, people that who you think could provide just interesting topics. Obviously, it's a little bit easier for kids to relate to real estate, but I kind of felt like I could have, picked, a number of different avenues that we could have gone down to just introduce things to them, even if it wasn't real estate. So if I could have brought in clients, whatever. So I know that our firm is at least committing to do this once a year, if not, a couple times a year. And I'm looking forward to answering any questions anyone has about the ease of getting it done, because it was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be, which is great.
Thank you so much, Nyla. Does anyone have any questions? No, but Nyla, this is exactly a great example of the kind of involvement that many of our board members are engaged with young people. And so kind of on that note, a personal absolute thank you for doing this, for hosting. And the thanks doesn't stop there. I mean, we have an exceptional board, and one of the things we are really proud about is how active the board members have been individually in their personal networks, and certainly as a collective. And so I just wanted to do some quick shout outs, starting with Nyla, and also wanted to lift up Jordana, our Secretary and Engagement Officer, who is has invited Step It Up Youth to the Lincoln Center anniversary. So these young people will be performing at this incredible event. So she can tell you more about that. I'd like to thank Liz, our fearless Vice Chair, who's been an incredible source of support and wisdom, and so active in all the different ways. Peter McCree has been advising our Compass Youth Sharks initiative. Reggie Miller has been recruiting his young people for the neighborhood advisory boards. All the members who have donated for the Smiles of Love gift drive in December, that includes Liz again, Jeanette, Nancy, Ray, among many others. Also a special thanks to Ana Garcia Reyes for hosting SYP young people and doing campus tours. And lastly, we're going to be also launching a small cohort of Ladders for Leaders interns in the philanthropic sector, which is a sector that I know the commissioner has been wanting to get into. We will break that hold. So there's been a ton of engagement, and I'm sure there are many other things that I've missed, but I just want to thank you all again, and we want to keep this momentum going. So there's so much more to do, and so with that, I think we're going to move on to the next piece, which again is around the civic engagement framework. And at the December meeting, we had a pretty robust discussion around youth involvement and particularly around civic engagement. And so right now we will have a presentation from Krystal Cason from DYCD's Program Quality and Innovation Unit, and Ramirez from the Program and Planning Unit, who will talk about DYCD's civic engagement framework.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us. Just a little background around Millie and myself. We have been working for the past year around building out our DYCD's approach to civic engagement, and we've been collaborating with units internally, and we've been hosting work groups. So this is like a labor of love for us, and we're doing this in addition to all the other things that we do at DYCD. So we thank you for allowing us to share this as we roll this approach out. So as I mentioned, that's not gonna work. Well, I'll talk you guys through it real quick. So we went ahead and convened work groups for the past year to talk about the state of DYCD's Promote the Positive initiative. I don't know if many of you are familiar with, about a year and a half ago, DYCD rolled out frameworks to support youth leadership, positive youth development, and social emotional learning. And there was a huge lift by the agency to, one, roll that out internally, and then to inform our networks of providers around our place as far as positive youth development, youth leadership, and SEL was concerned. So we did tons of trainings internally and externally. So about a year or so after Promote the Positive rolled out, which there were a lot of wins. So we were able to operationalize across all program areas positive youth development. What are those evaluation indicators that all of our program units can have? What does SEL mean for youth in younger programs or young adult programs? And then how does youth leadership live and breathe throughout our vast program areas? So the work group decided on the need to support or further support youth leadership development. So we recognize that our iteration of the youth leadership framework was really focused on youth in either community or school-based programs or after-school programs. And we recognized that there was a little gap in terms of us being able to support our SYEP program areas or our NDAs, right? So what we did was Millie went ahead and went through all RFPs to see where does civic engagement live across our various RFPs. Also, where does youth leadership live? And what we found, which is not surprising, because as an agency we've always had a strong push for community engagement and community service and service learning, is that civic engagement lived and breathed across all program areas. So we thought that this was the right opportunity for us to further define what that actually means. As you guys know, there's a huge mayoral push, right, for civic engagement. So we weren't doing this work in silos either. We were working, we met with the Chief Democracy Officer to talk about their plans to roll out the Democracy Now! Initiative, and we hope to then connect with DOE to talk further about their Democracy for All curriculum and how we can best support what's happening during the school day and after school, and also in just our community centers and community programs. So that's the why. And also just to note, in terms of DYCD's theory of change, we do have an outcome on our theory of change that focuses in on civic engagement. And so we now have the language, we have the buy-in internally. So now we're going to talk through what is the actual rollout for this, right? So how do you take a document that has a lot of nice words, right, a lot of meaning, a lot of substance, and roll that out, right? So phase one, we're doing from January to about May, January 2019 to May. We're working on the internal focus and rollout. So Millie and I have been meeting with small units to now take this language and help them operationalize it in their program areas, even beyond the evaluation tools that we have at DYCD. We also then have been meeting with thought partners across the city. So NYC Service, NYC Votes, to talk about the resources, because we are a resource-rich city that could potentially support this work internally and externally. And then we're going to look at how we can have some intentional partnerships with NYC Service and NYC Votes and the Chief Democracy's office. And then when we get to May, and we'll be doing tons of training internally, so let me preface this and say that there'll be tons of internal training. So for example, Friday, DYCD has a dedicated professional development day for the entire agency. So all staff will be taking part in amazing professional development. So Millie and I will be presenting this language and sparking interest in civic engagement, and just getting staff to really connect personally first to civic engagement, how civics lives in their everyday lives, and then start to brainstorm around what does it mean for us in terms of the work that we do, right? So then we'll be doing tons of other trainings where we'll be bringing on folks to take this framework and train our staff on it. So we're making sure that our staff is anchored in this information and language first before we roll it out to our providers. So then our external focus will begin in May, and we're just gonna swarm the system with tons of trainings, trainings that are intentional, trainings that speak to each program area. So if you are a workforce provider, we're gonna have training lined up for you to support workforce and civic engagement. And what does that actually mean? So the same is true for our NDA folks. Same is true for Beacons and Cornerstones and Compass. Same is true for our literacy and immigration unit as well. So we're really working with internal folks to build out intentional training opportunities. So let's talk about the approach and what we decided to do. So if you are not familiar with the DYCD's Youth Leadership Framework, what we did was we understood the importance of, one, not switching up our approach in terms of we blasted the system with tons of youth leadership training. We rolled out a framework. As much as possible, we have to create symmetry between the youth leadership framework and also the civic engagement framework so that folks don't feel like this is like completely different and blowing up the work that we've done or spent a year and a half doing, right? So we went ahead and we looked at and focused in on knowledge, skills, and attitudes in civics. We focused on civic action, and then we focused on what reflection could look like, right? So when we talk about understanding like civics literacy and knowledge, we recognize that it's super important for, one, participants across all of our programs to have an understanding of government processes that exist, right? How to get a street renamed or paved, or how to get, city council to acknowledge that there needs to be, speed bumps on your block, right? So the importance of civic knowledge and how civics works in this city, the different boards that govern this city. So we wanted to emphasize civic knowledge being a key component of that, right? And how providers decide to share civic knowledge is really up to them, right? So we're not saying that you have to sit participants in your program down and walk them through a Civics 101 course, right? We're not saying that, right? What we're saying is that there are key knowledge points that folks should be touching on in the various programs, and that would look different for an adult program, that will look different for a youth program, but we really do want to rely on the experts in the field, which are our CBOs that do this work and work with their constituents to better figure out how to actually implement these key components, right? So then we talked about skills and attitudes, right? So closely related to leadership skills and leadership skill building. So communication, how, building your listening and speaking skills, right? Being able to assertively state your point of view, right? Also being able to listen to other points of view and be able to take those points of views in, right? Active listening, right? We also talked about conflict resolution, right? And what does that mean? Because you're gonna come to a table and you're not always gonna agree, right? And that's okay. Right? So how do you then move forward from that, right? And also looking at how you look at conflict. So when we don't agree, what do we do, right? And what are those steps necessary for us to move on, right? We also talked about goal setting, right? So the hope is that when folks are civically engaged, they're planning, right? They're thinking around making change, which is closely related to the action. So how do you goal set, right? That's not something that comes natural to everyone, right? How do you plan out something, set a SMART goal, right? And make sure that you're marking and measuring the goals as you go through, right? That's something that can be taught to participants in the program. Really quickly, we talked about attitudes, which is really, for me, something that I was really focused in on, was building out attitudes around civics. So we know that everyone comes from different walks of life, and it's going to be super important for our providers to meet their participants where they are. They're going to be folks that are really engaged in the civic process and really excited about civics, and then there are going to be those that are not, right? And some of that has to do with environmental factors, right? Some of that has to do with making sure that we're culturally competent and understanding of the needs of the young people and adults in our programs. So making sure that we meet people where they're at, right? And the idea is that civics is attainable and reachable for all, but it will look different for every person, right? So I may decide to serve on a board. Millie may decide that I'm going to volunteer, you know, for a local cause that's important to me. One is not better or greater than the other. So the values around civics is going to be important as well. Then we move to Civics and Action, which will look different across our programs. So you'll have folks that are in youth programs doing service learning and peer mentoring and peer leadership. You'll have folks doing some organizing if that's what their young people choose to do, right? More explicitly for like our NABs and our beacons and cornerstones that have youth councils and youth boards, right? There's a very specific action that's required from our CBOs in their RFPs around supporting and having youth or just having an advisory board, right? So making sure that they have an understanding of how to engage youth and adults and put them in the same space, right? And to ensure that youth have also autonomy over that planning and decision-making process, and that both parties come together and are seen as valued members, right? So the action will look different across our programs. Then we talked about the reflection that's needed. So reflection is split into two kind of core areas. It's reflection for the organization, right? Where are you as an organization? What is your kind of like civic engagement footprint? And where are your resources and support? So thinking through that, right? Even way before you even start to engage in a conversation with participants or constituents in your program. And then the other side of it is the reflection for the participants, right? So we know that change takes time, right? And we also know that plans don't always go the way we want them to, right? So how do we take that and say, okay, this didn't work out, but here are the things that did, and how do we then take something that may feel in the moment unsuccessful and say, okay, we're gonna build this out, and here are the key things that we need to think about when building this out for the next time, right? That's really like a nutshell of the 4 areas. I didn't want to bore you guys with all of these things that I pulled out. But one of the key things that I think it's important for us, even DYCD, as we roll this out, is to really think about the environment that exists in our neighborhoods and in our programs, and making sure that, you know, folks that are charged with doing this work, you know, have meaning and purpose behind what they're doing, but then also that they're understanding of the folks that they're serving. So this is not a, you know, we need you to stand on this position or that position, or you have to be in a board, but it's more so that you are creating spaces where participants and also your young people and your adults feel safe enough to engage in conversations around civic engagement or issues that are happening to them. And that really is really the foundation first, even before you get to the knowledge and skills that you're going to support or the action that you want young people to do. Folks have to kind of take stock of their environment first. So that's the language in a nutshell.
So Krystal did a great job of sharing like where we are with the language, and we're very excited to talk to you guys, and we're hoping to have a conversation with you as the youth board around the language, ideas that you may have for this work moving forward. And so we thought we'd come to the table with like 2 or 3 questions just to hear from you. And our first question is, we were wondering if you can think of any partnerships or collaborations that you think are important and that would support this work moving forward. I'll start with that question. I can also, yeah, absolutely.
They're small, big,
Good.
doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. This is, I'll throw out something.
Oh, sorry. Are you familiar with the organization called Youth Inc.?
Actually, I have a friend that sits on the board. Yes, I am familiar.
Okay, well, the reason I bring it up is because it's really a collaborative organization in itself, and it has many youth-serving organizations as its partners. So, talking to them about potentially having a chance to talk to their partners and put the idea out.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
And,
That's great.
There used to be an organization called Children for Children. I think it transformed into another name that was all about volunteering.
Oh,
Okay, I believe it became part of America's Promise.
Okay.
I'm sorry. If you look up Children for Children, you might. Silda Wall was the founder originally, and so that.
Oh, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you.
I think this might also be a great opportunity for different departments in the city to be involved, and so that they could, you know, maybe NYCHA should be involved so young people can understand the role that NYCHA, government offices, as part of the civic understanding and civic leadership with young people, if they understood what government, the different departments, including this one.
Thank you. I think that's such a great point, given that we have so many programs in NYCHA development. So thank you.
So, I also, there's a lot of, these times are pretty, there's a lot of opportunities to engage now, and I think one of the issues that's coming up that's going to be impactful for us around the country is the census. And I imagine the city is engaged in a lot of census activity, but for young people themselves to get involved in the census and why it's important, especially if there are going to be barriers put up to it, how we have to ensure that all of our immigrant communities feel safe enough to encourage their families to participate, households to participate. So census to me is next year, so it's important.
Absolutely.
Can I ask that? I'm walking over. So, in fact, one of the things we'll probably talk about the next board meeting is that we're developing a census outreach strategy through the agency, which is going to be part of a larger war room effort led by Deputy Mayor Thompson. Because one of the shocking things I learned was that in the 2010 census, Brooklyn had the lowest response rate of any county in the country. And we should be ashamed of that. The city should be ashamed of that. And that's partly why we've lost federal funding. That's why I think we lost 2 congressional seats in 2010. So starting this summer, we're asking the nonprofit agencies working in the Summer Youth Employment Program to identify civic engagement work sites with a focus on census. And the areas we want to focus in on are public housing and immigrant serving organizations, because that's where we think the undercount will be. And so there are a number of Summer Youth Employment Programs that target public housing. I want to say 20, something like that, which are in high crime areas. So there'll be an infrastructure in place to tap into. So you're absolutely right. Census is something that has gotten short shrift in the past, but we can't afford not to do it. And young people can be critical messengers in that area.
Thank you so much. This is great. You're actually answering all of our questions. We wanted to sort of pick your brain about what action steps or ideas you think would support this work. And then the last question we had, are there opportunities for us as our team, the DYCD Civic Engagement Team, to support some of the vision and goals you guys have as the youth board? So this is great. You're actually touching on lots of different areas. If anyone else has anything else to share?
Well, just to build off what Jackie said, I think DCAS is another agency because I think the whole idea of how do people become civil servants is important, and some people have that information, and now that I'm more involved, it's just something that a lot of families and students don't know how to access that, and I think that could be a good thing.
Absolutely.
I just want to add one thing in terms of looking at maybe a framework for getting the word out about civic engagement. I think it's really important to involve parents. I think in terms of maybe think about how that could be integrated in your action plan.
I think that's a great point. We actually do have a family engagement language and framework, so we can definitely connect with those folks. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So what I was gonna add is maybe you can also gather some of the learnings of NYC Service, because they have a really strong platform in terms of how they've just done storytelling around civic engagement, and then what are some of the learnings there and how that could be applied here, or maybe what are some of the platforms that they've created that you can actually leverage in this space.
One thing that we are hopeful that we are able to do is that we recently applied for a VISTA a staff member with NYC Service to support and further roll out the civic engagement work. So fingers crossed. If we're able to get someone on board for August, we envision creating more connections with a deeper, richer connection with NYC Service, and also getting NYC Service to support the build out of youth councils and youth advisory boards for our Beacon and Cornerstones, like helping them guide and create sustainable practices that can be seen across all Beacon and Cornerstone programs. So that's like on our wish list of things that we want to do. So thank you.
This is kind of a dumb question. I'm assuming you talking to the Department of Education.
Yes. Oh yes. So that's in our timeline. So as DOE is rolling out their Civics for All, we are hopeful to kind of get into those conversations as well. It's on our list.
It also layers career development
Absolutely.
education. So
yeah.
There's a lot of talk about that.
Yes. Yes.
Kind of fits in very
It's perfect. Yeah.
Just one more thing. I see this also an opportunity for young people to inform this board. So if you could build that into your planning.
Good segue tomorrow.
I know. Something we talked about.
One more resource, a Y plan. I don't know if you ever heard, out of Berkeley. Some of our schools have used that. It's basically where students are taking on a problem in their community and working with an outside agency to come up with a plan to address a community problem and learning how to address it. It's a good one. Y plan.
I was just gonna say, actually, why don't you close out?
We just want to thank you guys so much for having us at the table, presenting our framework. We really hope to sort of partner down the road at some point with you guys and supporting this work. But we thank you so much. These were great ideas. You've answered all of our questions. And thank you.
Thank you both, and I think you noticed from the discussion and the eagerness that there is a lot of energy around this work, and so thank you to the agency for moving this forward. We will be reconnecting with you because youth voice is leading into our next conversation, and the question around meaningful engagement and what does that look like is something that I think we want to jump into as well. So there's really a lot of alignment. So thank you both for the work. So, thank you, Jackie, for the segue into the next portion of our agenda here. So, back in, we have had a running theme throughout our conversations over the last several meetings, and certainly in our January 22nd Programs Committee, this question around youth representation and youth voice on the youth board/youth committee has continued to kind of bubble up in many of our smaller discussions, and certainly was a predominant focus of the programs committee meeting. So I guess as we jump in to talk about that, given that it was a small committee meeting, we'd like to engage the rest of the board because we really do feel like it's an important issue. So maybe Anthony, you could give us a recap of the programs committee discussion to get everyone on the same page.
Yeah, so as Alexa mentioned, at the January 22nd Programs Committee meeting, we had a discussion about youth voice, youth representation in the youth board, because several of you have asked, well, haven't we had youth reps? Don't we have youth reps? And officially speaking, it's not as if we have in the bylaws, you need to have officially 2 youth reps or an exact number of youth reps. What has happened in the past is that young people were appointed to the board, and it's not like after they hit a certain age, they aged out or anything. They became our young adult members of the board. If you know some of those members, Palissa Guo and Erica Larson, they've now moved on. They've gone to college. They graduated. They're in graduate school. Palissa's doing she's a Clarendon scholar at Oxford. So, you know, we've had young people who were appointed and they stayed on, and now they grow up. Yeah, and you know, we didn't see any need to say to them, okay, you hit a certain age, now you need to step off, right? But I think it did raise the question, if we were to officially have youth reps, and if we were to change the bylaws to have that, what does that mean? What does that look like? Is there a certain age frame, 16 to 18? You serve 2 years, okay, great. Well, what are you doing, right? What's our expectation for them and for us, right? So that's where some of this conversation came around. And at the same time as some of these questions were being posed by certain members, there's been a discussion internally with certain staff about an idea of forming a youth advisory board that advises DYCD directly on its programs and practices and policies. You know, I know a lot of times this body is the youth board, and I know sometimes people, when I say we have a youth board, they think this is the body of young people. When I say no, these are mostly adults who have a keen interest in young people. So there's been a parallel conversation with some of our staff in thinking about should we, how do we form a youth advisory board, and that's an ongoing conversation. There are some staff who would love to launch that for fiscal 2020, but it's also a matter of staffing and resources for ourselves internally. So we don't have a set answer on that yet. It's not something that we're ready to set up and announce or what have you. But I think it's a timely conversation, because even if that does get set up, there's questions around how does that youth advisory board relate to this board. But even if that gets set up or not, there still is the opportunity for this board to think about whether they want to have official youth reps, or are there other ways to incorporate youth voice. And I think there's some other ideas around, and as Jackie, you just mentioned, can we have regular presentations of young people to this board on topics of interest to this board or other areas, right? So there's other ways to incorporate youth voice even into what this board and committee does. That's not, say, officially having youth reps appointed, but that's not to say that that's not an option either. So I think this is the conversation to have with all of you about how we want to move forward. So I think our plan to have this conversation is to break up into 2 groups and have some conversation and move forward and figure this out.
And I will just reiterate that, you know, there was really a lot of resonance around representation of young people on this board and what that means. And so we'd love I guess we are a small group, but we can have small intimate discussions to really hone in on, does this resonate with you? Do you, can you see youth voice and representation as an actual member here on the board? If so, what would that look like? Could it be actual reps, or does it mean that, you know, we're going to be inviting young people to participate in that? So I suspect this is going to be an ongoing conversation. We have had ideas of maybe potentially putting together a resolution if the group affirms and agrees that that's the direction we want to go in. And also, hopefully, I would love to have folks to volunteer who wants to move this forward, probably in a smaller subcommittee. So I guess with that, I guess we can have just two smaller groups break out. Yeah.
Speaking about the possibility of them being members of the board, is that even a realistic ask given the times that we meet?
Perfect. So I think, yes, there are implications, and so the question for the board becomes, you know, what structures need to change.
Okay. And then the second question is, in the past, is it easy, like, what's the process been to identify, like, who the right people are? Is it difficult? Is it a fight to get people from certain programs? Like, what's the process been?
You can probably answer that better.
Are you in general, in terms
Yeah,
of, or young people in particular?
For the young people,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, like,
So-
would you want someone from each program, from, like, how do you?
Well, you know, again, that's another thing we could look at too, right? In several of our program areas, for example, Beacons and Cornerstones, they have youth councils. So if, say, we were to have youth representation here, do we have some type of pathway, pipeline, you know, to this board through that? Again, if we do set up this separate youth advisory board, maybe is there a pathway from that here? So these are exactly the types of questions I think we want to think through. And to your earlier point, Nyla, I think timing is an issue, right? If we're talking about young people and they're in school, like 8:30 to 10, you're supposed to be in school, right? But so these are some of the things we have to think through. And I think there is Alameda, who was appointed last year as a senior, and now she's a first year in college. She hasn't been able to attend, right? So I think there are some of these structural issues we need to look at.
I'll just quickly say, you know, with Alameda's a great example. She was appointed through her city council person, so there is a question around what that process looks like and even what the criteria are, and you know, how could we support? And part of this conversation also emerged from my conversations with her around how could this engagement be more meaningful to her, given all the kind of challenges of the time, and she's now in Massachusetts. So I think that was part of us wanting to be more explicit around what our engagement looks like. And so I think that's kind of the question on the table is, you know, do we want to move forward with a more intentional practice, and what would that look like?
I have a question into that because, so for me, I would say yes, it is important, but I think I think some of the tactical questions then become yes to scheduling, and are we flexible enough? I think we have to have that honest conversation with ourselves. What are the expectations? And will we actually put into practice whatever the opinions are or recommendations are of youth? I think that we have to just be honest to what will we do with that feedback? Because we want it to be a meaningful experience for them and for everybody that's sitting on this board. So I almost feel like before we even break out into sessions or smaller groups is we have to have the honest conversations with us as to where's their flexibility really for that engagement of youth voice. And I say that because so many years ago, in partnership with DYCD, Nike, I did a research project through Ladders for Leaders, where we actually took 20 Ladders for Leaders participants and we had them assess 200 DYCD programs against program design filters. And the lowest scoring one was feedback from kids, meaning that it was great. All the programs that DYCD was developing and implementing were phenomenal, but it was almost like built in an ivory tower without the direct feedback from the kids. And so what do we want to say here for youth? Like, are we really going to engage them in a meaningful way and actually put into practice whatever their recommendations are?
I think that raises a good point of, are we doing this for ourselves or are we doing it for the kids? Like, is this an experience for kids to come and sit in an adult setting and interact with them in a formal decision-making way? Or is it because without their input, you know, we're not doing as good a job as we could do? For me, I support the idea of having this separate group that is I mean, if DYCD has a staff to manage it, I know for CTE programs, we had like a youth council, which actually I think has stopped recently because we didn't have the staff to continue it. But I do think like some kind of way of having a group of kids come and raise their interest and have discussions and have them come and present to us. And again, I don't really know what we do, but in some ways, what do we as a board do? I mean, we kind of give you and you take, but we're a little older and understand like we're not like Congress that are voting like something that's we're all like for or against. It's kind of a more like you're getting soft feedback from an adult group. And so anyway, I think that might be, I think what I think for me, it's like, don't change the bylaws. Again, if there are young people that are coming, that are in this group that are participating, that your staff and maybe we see are like really outstanding and who have an interest and have some idea of what we're about. Because I think Priscilla was around for 3 or 4 years and she was really committed. I mean, I think it is good to have some younger voices at the table. So that's
I feel like our small group discussion is becoming a large group discussion. So take even this presentation today. Let's just say we do have a separate board. I think that the young ladies who presented would benefit from having that group separately, engaging in dialogue, because as she went through her phase 1 rollout, it sounds like she's focusing on staff first. So now you have a cohort of young people that can be part of this and their feedback can get rolled in. And let's just say, we as the adult board, I think it becomes a lot easier for us to do things like when the kids are out of school, plan a lunch, and we figure out other ways to mingle with that board, or maybe we plan for them to do more official presentations to the board, like a week, and again, it may require us to do something that's not a scheduled or mandatory board meeting, but if we knew that, on a weekend or a Friday after school at 3-4 o'clock, the youth board was going to present to us and talk about some things that they would like to see, I think they would like that more. I think it's just, to your point, it's kind of like you have to now think about how you staff that because they still need an adult in the room. But I think what it does is it allows, as you roll out these different programs, it does allow for the same presentations we get, the same questions we get asked to be asked of young people, and then you can get their feedback. And then we can figure out as a board, like what activities we can do to engage with that board. And maybe it does work out that, we do a couple of things together, some things more fun, some things more official, But I think that the time, and to your point, it's like, are we doing it for us or them? Because, the average 15-year-old probably doesn't want to sit in a meeting with us at 8:30 in the morning and have this discussion. So,
I just want to say that the teacher in me is saying, to be fair to the kids, you really do have to have the staffing to support their participation. Otherwise, it's not going to be meaningful in any way. And so they get to put it on the resume, but the whole idea is that they walk away having learned something and having shared their views. So just be really careful when it's great to say we have a youth presence, but if it's just in name only, I don't think we're already talking about staff cuts.
Again, that's why there's only been internal conversation on this, and even the executive team still need to consider this. That's a very real issue. If we were to set up a separate youth advisory board, staffing is key.
Yeah.
So we don't, it's a serious thing we have to think through.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think any youth development, any youth leader is developed, and we need to put the time into it, or it really is meaningless. But I do think that we shouldn't just completely move away from having them here. I do think that youth are not monolithic, and there's different segments of youth that we need to listen to and hear, what their voice is, and from whether it's middle school youth and they're coming to age and what their experience is within the school system, high school students that are different from that are in public schools versus private schools. college students, I think, or young adults that we need to hear from, kids that are disconnected, that are in other alternative types of programming. And I think that there's segments of groups of young people that we should really be deliberate about, of thinking of what voices they are, and let's ensure that there's a way that we can hear them, whether it's, it's planful, and it's topical, and it's not just that individual young person. I like the fact that the New York City, service has been really deliberate in promoting youth councils and youth representations in different city agencies and youth programs and in, a lot of different settings, but at least, through that participation, they are exposed to and get to understand in depth wherever they're housed at or where they're participating in. And maybe it's through those structures that we, can get some of those young people to talk. I just think, we need to hear youth voice that's authentic and that's connected. It's not just an individual young person because they're smart and they think about a lot of things, but rather that they're young people that are civically engaged in their environment and in whatever form that they're at. So, I do think it's good if we could have a youth appointed here, but not see that that's the sole youth voice that we're paying attention to.
I would totally agree with that. I think it's always both and. I think we want to think about all the ways. I certainly would really love to see, if there is youth representation here at this table, that engagement be more explicit and really kind of intentional around, what is the mentorship the partnership opportunity for, Alameda was really overwhelmed and there wasn't a specific approach around how we would engage all that goodness. And I think, as a board, we can create some processes and structures to really kind of help facilitate any youth representation that happens to be at this table, but also how to really leverage all the structures and councils and boards that are already in the system, because we do need that feedback and we want to hear that voice.
I'm just also wondering if we might want to consider anchoring it around an issue so that it would play both ways, something we want to learn more about, maybe middle school experience, but to be able to direct it a little bit as a overall learning experience that would work for both sides.
It sounds like, I realize the time, we are definitely coming up on time, and I want to honor that. So I really thank all the input and interest. This will be an ongoing conversation. Excuse me. And so we'll be reaching out.
Please press star 1 to continue with this conference.
The person on the phone has ended the meeting. So with that, of course, I have to say, Patty, I'm so sad that you will not be part of this board. You have been an incredible voice and advocate, and
I honestly don't feel that I've brought that much.
You absolutely have. So on behalf of the board, thank you for your service. Thank you for all that you do. And I guess with that, one final thing.
So I'm gonna hand out to everyone, and we'll send it via email as well. As you know, we're heading into big event season for DYCD, so we have some major events coming up. This is for all of you to see. If you want to attend any of these, definitely let us know. Also, Andre and myself are going to do a little more thinking based upon what we know about each of you, and may want to suggest specific events you may want to attend or participate in. So you're free to attend any of these, but I think we're going to do a little more thinking and reach out to you directly.
So with that, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.